On the morning of June 7, 1998, James Byrd Jr. woke up like any other man. A father, a son, a brother. He had dreams, a family who loved him, and a future full of possibilities. But by that night, his life would be torn from him in a way that no one could have ever predicted. No one could have imagined the horrific, brutal truth that would unfold on a quiet road in Jasper, Texas. James Byrd Jr. didn't deserve to die like this. No one ever does. But that's exactly what happened. Jasper, Texas was a small, tight-knit town. It was the kind of place where everyone knew everyone else. People were friendly, warm-hearted, and their lives were built on years of deep community ties. James Byrd Jr. was known to many as a hard-working, good-natured man. His life hadn't been easy, but he was someone who always carried a smile with him, even through hard times. Born in 1949, James had spent most of his life in Jasper, working various jobs, including as a truck driver. He had a family who loved him dearly. His children, his siblings, his parents. Life wasn't perfect, but it was his. He had a purpose. And though James had faced his fair share of hardships, he kept pushing forward, he kept moving. But one late evening, James's life would come to a tragic end. The kind of end that would change not just his family, but the entire world. On the evening of June 7th, James was walking home from a party. It was a Friday, and like many others, he was just trying to get by. He had no idea that as he was walking down the road, he would meet his fate at the hands of two men. Men who saw him as nothing more than a target. It all began when two white men, Sean Barry and Lawrence Brewer, spotted James while they were driving. They had just picked up a third accomplice, John William King, a man who had long been associated with hate, violence, and racism. They saw James, and something in them snapped. They stopped the truck and offered him a ride. A simple gesture, one that seemed harmless at first glance. But little did James know, he was stepping into a nightmare. They had no intention of driving him to safety. Instead, they had every intention of using him as a pawn in their horrific game of hate. What followed was a scene that would haunt the nation for years to come. They tied James Byrd Jr. to the back of their truck with a chain. And then they drove. They drove for 3 miles. 3 miles of terror, pain, and unimaginable suffering as James was dragged behind the truck. His body torn apart by the rough Texas road, his life ripped from him inch by inch. At some point, James's body was so violently shredded that his head was completely severed from his body, leaving his lifeless form scattered along the side of the road. When they finally stopped, they left him there like nothing more than a piece of trash, his body crushed, mangled, and discarded. The horror of what had just transpired began to seep through the community, and soon, the police were called. James Byrd Jr.'s lifeless body was discovered, still chained, with the bloodied remnants of a once vibrant man left to tell the story. It didn't take long for the investigation to begin, and what came next would shock the world. As authorities pieced together the horrifying details, the townspeople of Jasper were left reeling in disbelief. How could something like this happen in their quiet town? How could these men, who seemed so ordinary, commit such a monstrous act? The case quickly grabbed national attention, and as the investigation unfolded, the truth began to emerge. The men responsible for this crime were fueled by hatred, hate so deep that they had planned the murder in cold blood. But what shook the community even more was the power shift that followed. The men who thought they could get away with murder because of their whiteness, their privilege, were now under intense scrutiny. They underestimated the power of the law and the determination of a grieving family. And soon, the tides began to turn. The case became a battle for justice, not just for James Byrd Jr., but for everyone who had ever been the victim of racial hatred. Sean Barry, Lawrence Brewer, and John William King were arrested, but the fight for justice was far from over. The trial was set to begin, and the nation watched as the details of that night came to light. As the trial unfolded, the defense tried to argue that the murder was not racially motivated, but the evidence was undeniable. Witnesses, law enforcement, and forensic experts all testified to the fact that this was a hate crime, a crime fueled by a desire to destroy, to erase, to perpetuate the poison of racism. Barry and Brewer were convicted, But it was King, the leader of this hateful trio, who was the focus of the world's attention. He was sentenced to death, and for the first time it seemed like justice might actually be served. The power shift was palpable. The men who thought they could destroy James Byrd Jr. with their violence had been brought to justice. And as the gavel came down in the courtroom, the world breathed a collective sigh of relief. Justice, it seemed, had finally arrived. James Byrd Jr. may have lost his life in a way that will never be forgotten, but his legacy is powerful. His death became a rallying cry for justice, for the fight against racism, and for the belief that no matter how deep the hatred may run, love and justice will always find a way to rise. In the years following his death, James's family and the community fought for change. The death penalty for Lawrence Brewer and John William King remained in place. But it wasn't just about punishment, it was about making sure that something like this could never happen again. James Byrd Jr.'s death became the catalyst for the passage of the Matthew Shepard and James Byrd Jr. Hate Crimes Prevention Act in 2009, a landmark piece of legislation that expanded federal hate crime laws to include crimes based on gender identity, sexual orientation, and disability. James's life and death led to real change, and his story has become a reminder of the power of justice, even in the face of overwhelming evil. What happened to James Byrd Jr. should never be forgotten. His life and his tragic death have taught us the importance of standing against hate, of fighting for justice, and of holding those who commit such atrocities accountable. Do you believe justice was truly served in this case? Was the death penalty a fitting sentence, or did it miss the larger point? Share your thoughts in the comments below. And if you want to continue learning about cases that shape the fight for justice, subscribe to our channel. Let's never forget James Byrd Jr. and the impact his story had on the world. Thank you for watching.